Do you remember Paper Mario? Like when Paper Mario was still good? Paper Mario was freaking awesome. What happened? Where have all the good Paper Mario games gone? Bug Fables is a modern Paper Mario RPG that we deserve. It's an indie title made by Moonsprout Games, and it was released on Nintendo Switch in May of last year, and I'm just now getting around to finally playing it and seeing what this game's all about. Welcome back to Experience Points. I am SuperDerek. I make thoughtful and thought-provoking videos for gamers who love RPGs, and today we're taking a look at Moonsprout Games' Bug Fables. Bug Fables unabashedly borrows heavily from Paper Mario. It's got that very obvious paper cutout aesthetic that was established for the first time in the Paper Mario games, and it carries over a lot of additional things than just that. Like, it's got that lighthearted story that just kind of leans a little bit into the humorous side of the storytelling. It's got that timing-based battles that I was actually just talking about recently in my video about different battle mechanics that I really enjoy. Well, Bug Fables really nails that. So when you choose to attack something, there's still more for the player to do to be engaged. It doesn't just go up and do the attack. You know, there's timing-based stuff, there's aiming-based kind of timing stuff. It's a bit different, and there's a lot of strategy built up in it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And those timings not only increase the amount of damage that you do, but it also decreases the amount of damage that you take if you guard. And it's got really good feedback, I think, on your timing. It's pretty easy to see when someone like winces because they're about to get hit. You know, it's easy to tell if you got the timing too early or too late. It's also got the really small numbers. That's one of the weird things about Paper Mario that I kind of enjoyed. It doesn't just pump up the numbers. Like, you don't have thousands of hit points. You don't deal hundreds of damage. It's like you have 15, 20 hit points, and you take, 2 to 4 points of damage depending on how much damage you were dealt, right? I really appreciate that. It keeps things kind of small, and I feel like it also borrows that from Paper Mario as well. That limited inventory space, so you're definitely deciding what best to take along with you, because you can't just take 1,000 healing items, because that just takes all the challenge out of the game. And this game does bring the challenge, but it also has some new mechanics that it introduces to this sort of, can we call it a genre yet? A subgenre? I don't think it's quite a subgenre, because right now it's a subgenre of two, as far as I know, Paper Mario and now Bug Fables. So anyways, it brings some unique mechanics with it though. The ability to cook certain ingredients that you can purchase at a store. So like, you could just buy a mushroom, or you could buy a dewdrop, and you could just use them as is, but you can also take them to a cook who will also be able to combine them for various effects, or just cook a one-off item to change its effects. It's pretty interesting. I haven't explored with it too much, but it's nice that it's there and introduced early on in the game. I've gone through the first chapter so far and a little bit way into the second chapter, and it's already something that I'm definitely wrapping my mind around still, as far as like how best to utilize it and as I move my way forward. It also has 3 main party members who are always going to be in your party, as far as I can tell. And one of the really cool things about these 3 protagonists is that they each have their own strengths. So they've got their melee, the magic, and the ranged attacks, but they can also use those outside of combat to help solve various puzzles. The moth, for instance, has this ability to use freeze magic. So when you see giant drops of water dripping down from the ceiling, you can freeze them midair, and then you can use the beetle guy to use his attack outside of combat to knock the ice cube around so that you can use that as a little platform. And the bee person has the ability to hit things from afar using their bee-meringue. It's one of those kinds of games where it leans into puns and little bits of wordplay that I really do appreciate. Viewers of mine on Twitch will know that I am a glutton for punishment. And those also apply inside of combat, so like different enemies will have different weaknesses. Flying enemies can only be hit by ranged attacks, and also through certain magical spells that can be cast by the moth. There's a lot of unique mechanics that are always in play and definitely help provide a bit of challenge and variety to the way that these battles take place. Very similar to how you would see them in, Paper Mario. There are some enemies that can only be attacked by the beetle because they've got a harder outer shell and the beetle attacks from underneath, right? It's kind of got this rock, paper, scissors sort of thing going on. And one of the other things that I really appreciate is that party members can actually pass their turns back and forth between each other. So if you're fighting two flying things and only one of your protagonists, one of your party members is able to hit those, you can switch your turn to the person with the bee meringue, and then you can give the bee a second turn. But with the caveat being that as you do successive attacks, their strength of attack decreases, so you kind of have to weigh that a little bit. So you can't just use your most powerful person 3 times in a row doing, a lot of melee damage or something. Like I said, those successive turns decrease in effectiveness. I really appreciate the tactical aspect of that. The game also opens up to you a side questing kind of guild. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically a guild where you can go and perform some side quests around town, whether they be just to maybe go cook something for an old man bug and you can give him his hearty breakfast, or you could go finding some books for some people, or return some books to the library for some people. And sometimes they'll give you things like medals, sometimes they'll give you things like just berries, the in-game currency. And speaking of those equipable medals, they're super handy. They can give you a variety of various stat boosts or bonuses, resistances. My favorite medal so far has been basically a hard mode badge, which you can just equip, and you can either equip it early on and just leave it equipped, or you can unequip and re-equip it as you go. But you do get extra bonuses if you defeat bosses. When I was wearing that difficulty badge, the boss fight that I did with the hardened spider, that was pretty tough, and I barely made it out alive. I gotta say, it was really satisfying. It took a couple of tries. One thing that I do think was could have been streamlined a little bit is if you do die, there's not like a retry option. I don't know, I've just been spoiled lately with that, I guess, and I really think that would have been really nice to just try that again. I think that is also something from Paper Mario, so when I died and went back to a load screen, it's kind of like, that seems out of character. Again, this is not a Paper Mario game, but it feels so much like one, unabashedly so. Obviously, huge amounts of inspiration were taken from the Paper Mario games. Not being able to retry against the spider, it wasn't really a huge loss because I had saved pretty recently, but yeah, it would have been nice to just kind of streamline that process a little bit. The game also does depart from Paper Mario a little bit in that it no longer has, well, Mario as the silent protagonist doing their pantomiming of various things, which was very charming. It was a very charming aspect of the Paper Mario games, but now we have 3 very vocal protagonists in the party, and they're all pretty well established characters at this point. I feel like each one kind of rests into a couple of categories of characters that we kind of know. We've got the gung-ho bee who's super into going on an adventure, feisty and everything. You've got the beetle who seems kind of like a chivalrous sort of character. That's kind of funny because he's kind of playing the role of a knight. And then you've got the aloof moth who seems to speak about themselves in like the second person. They refer to themselves as we. It's kind of funny because, the ethereal moth who controls magic has some sort of like split personality syndrome going on. It's pretty interesting. I kind of think it's funny, but at the same time, I think it's clever because they're a moth. They've gone through some sort of metamorphosis, right? In order to go from like a worm into, or not a worm, but a caterpillar into some sort of moth. I think that's kind of funny. So they are they. And obviously Bug Fables, it's about bugs in kind of a modern era, but they are living and existing in sort of a medieval sort of setting. It's a really interesting concept that kind of reminds me of, like A Bug's Life, but mixed with a JRPG setting. So it takes place in the Kingdom of Bulgaria, and it's a kingdom that is made of like small, or to them, they're large stones. They're made of human garbage and litter and stuff, and it just provides that really unique setting for an RPG adventure. If A Bug's Life had codes of chivalry, going on adventures for artifacts, and kingdoms of other bugs like warring against each other, it's kind of like that. Bug Fables is a pretty awesome game. Humorous dialogue, it's got a quirky setting, challenging combat with the badge especially gets very challenging if you're using that badge. This will certainly scratch that Paper Mario itch. And if you're new here, please be sure to get subscribed because I am SuperDerek. I make thoughtful and thought-provoking videos for gamers who love RPGs, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, everyone.